When Marcus Reynolds sat in the sterile room of St. Augustine's Hospital, his mind was blank. He stared at the white walls, barely hearing the doctor's words as they tumbled through the air like jagged shards of glass. "You have 24 hours left to live." The phrase was heavy, final, and utterly devastating. His heart pounded in his chest, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. How could this be happening? Just yesterday, he was a healthy, middle-aged man with a stable job, a loving family, and plans for the future. Today, he was being told that his life was nothing more than sand slipping rapidly through an hourglass. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. Dr. Lancaster had explained the diagnosis, a rare and aggressive form of leukemia that had gone undetected until now. The symptoms, Marcus realized in hindsight, had been there for weeks. The persistent fatigue, the random bruising, the fever that wouldn't quit. But he had written them off as stress, the byproduct of long hours and sleepless nights. He never imagined that a silent killer had been festering in his bloodstream, poised to strike without warning. And now it was too late for treatments or miracles, or so they said. He was a man on borrowed time, standing at the edge of an abyss. Leaving the hospital in a daze, Marcus walked the streets of the city, his mind churning with memories, regrets, and an overwhelming sense of helplessness. The world seemed cruelly indifferent to his plight. People bustled past him, immersed in their routines, oblivious to the man whose clock was ticking down to zero. He felt invisible, as though he had already crossed over into another realm where the living could no longer see him. When he arrived home, his wife Emily was waiting for him in the kitchen. Her face lit up at the sight of him, but her joy quickly turned to concern when she noticed his pallor and trembling hands. "Marcus, what's wrong?" she asked, rushing to his side. He couldn't find the words at first. How do you tell the person you love most in the world that your time together is nearly over? Eventually, he managed to choke out the truth. Emily's reaction was immediate and visceral. She collapsed into his arms, her sobs shaking them both as they clung to each other like shipwreck survivors adrift in a merciless sea. That night, Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling as Emily slept fitfully beside him. He couldn't shake the thought that his life had been unremarkable, a collection of mundane moments strung together without purpose. He had always played it safe, choosing stability over passion, routine over adventure. What legacy would he leave behind? A stack of spreadsheets at the office? A handful of family photos that would eventually gather dust in an attic? The thought filled him with despair. As dawn broke, Marcus made a decision. If these were truly his last hours, he would not spend them wallowing in self-pity. He would live as he had never lived before. With Emily's blessing, he set out to make amends and say goodbye to the people who mattered most. His first stop was his estranged brother, Paul. They hadn't spoken in years, their relationship fractured by a bitter argument over their late parents' estate. Marcus arrived unannounced, and when Paul opened the door, his expression was a mix of surprise and wariness. "I don't have much time," Marcus said, his voice trembling with emotion. "But I couldn't leave this world without telling you I'm sorry." Paul hesitated for a moment, then pulled his brother into a tight embrace. "I'm sorry too," he whispered, and just like that, the years of resentment melted away. They spent the morning reminiscing, laughing, and rediscovering the bond they thought they had lost forever. Next, Marcus visited his childhood friend Claire, who had moved across town years ago, but had always held a special place in his heart. They walked through the park where they had played as kids, their conversation flowing effortlessly as though no time had passed. Marcus told her about his diagnosis and she cried for him, but he could see the gratitude in her eyes as well. She was thankful for the chance to say goodbye, to tell him how much he had meant to her. As the hours slipped away, Marcus found himself in a small chapel, the sunlight streaming through stained glass windows casting colorful patterns on the floor. He wasn't a religious man, but he felt an inexplicable pull to this place of quiet reflection. He knelt at the altar, his hands clasped tightly together, and poured out his heart. He prayed for strength, for peace, for forgiveness, and for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. When he returned home that evening, Emily greeted him with a tearful smile. She had prepared a candlelit dinner, determined to make their last night together as beautiful as possible. They shared stories, laughed, and held each other close, savoring every moment. As the clock struck midnight, Marcus felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He was ready to face whatever lay ahead. But something strange happened. When the sun rose the next morning, Marcus was still alive. Confused and cautiously optimistic, he called Dr. Lancaster, who agreed to run more tests. The results were nothing short of miraculous. The aggressive cancer that had been ravaging his body was gone, leaving no trace of its existence. The doctors were baffled, unable to explain what had happened. Some called it a medical anomaly. Others whispered about divine intervention. Marcus simply called it a second chance. Overwhelmed with emotion, Marcus vowed never to take life for granted again. He left his corporate job to pursue his lifelong dream of becoming a writer, channeling his experiences into stories that inspired and uplifted others. He and Emily traveled the world, ticking off every item on their bucket list and discovering new dreams along the way. Marcus reconnected with old friends, forged new relationships, and became a beacon of hope for those facing their own battles. The day after Marcus's miraculous recovery, he woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside his window, a sound he hadn't truly noticed in years. The light spilling through the curtains felt warmer, more alive. Everything around him seemed sharper, more vibrant, as if his senses had been reborn along with his health. It wasn't just survival, it was as if life itself had pulled him back and given him a fresh slate. Marcus lay there for a moment, savoring the quiet stillness, before turning to Emily, who was still asleep beside him. She had stayed up the night before, unwilling to waste a moment of what she thought would be their final hours together. Now, her face was peaceful, her breaths even. He reached out to stroke her hair, the simple act filling him with gratitude. As the morning progressed, Marcus realized he had been handed something rare, something precious. He had been given time, not just to live, but to redefine himself. Yet that was no easy task. As he poured his coffee and stared out the kitchen window, he felt a wave of uncertainty. What now? The question hung over him like a challenge. It wasn't enough to return to his old life, not after everything he had experienced. He needed to transform, to truly honor the second chance he had been given. He began his journey by making a list, not of things to do, but of things to become. He wrote down qualities he wanted to embody, the kind of man he wanted to be remembered as: compassionate, adventurous, present. He realized that for most of his life he had been living on autopilot, merely going through the motions. This time, he would live deliberately. One of the first steps Marcus took was reaching out to the community around him. He had spent so many years focused inward, on his career, his personal goals, his immediate family, that he had forgotten the joy of connection. He began volunteering at a local shelter, serving meals to those in need and listening to their stories. He realized that everyone carried their own burdens, their own moments of despair, and their own hopes for redemption. One evening, he met a man named Joseph, who had been homeless for years after losing his job and family in a series of misfortunes. Marcus sat with him, not offering solutions but simply sharing space. By the end of the night, Joseph said, "You're the first person who's really seen me in a long time." That moment stuck with Marcus. He wasn't just living for himself anymore. He was living to make a difference. Meanwhile, Emily was undergoing her own transformation. The experience of almost losing Marcus had shaken her to her core, but it had also reignited a passion she hadn't felt in years. She had always dreamed of starting a non-profit organization to support women in need, but the practicalities of life had always gotten in the way. Now, inspired by Marcus's courage, she decided to take the leap. Together, they poured their energy into building a foundation that offered resources, education, and community support to women facing challenges like abuse, poverty, and single parenthood. As the months passed, Marcus began to notice something remarkable about his approach to time. It wasn't just that he was living more fully, he was savoring every moment, big or small. He found joy in the mundane, in the way the sunlight danced on the leaves, in the laughter of children at the park, in the smell of freshly baked bread wafting from a nearby bakery. He started journaling every night, capturing these moments and reflecting on what they meant. Over time, these reflections became the foundation of a memoir, one that chronicled not just his brush with death, but the rebirth that followed. Marcus also discovered a newfound love for adventure. For years, he had dreamed of seeing the world, but had always found reasons to delay. Work obligations, financial concerns, fear of the unknown. Now, he and Emily began traveling, embracing the unpredictability of life on the road. They hiked the rugged trails of Patagonia, stood in awe before the pyramids of Egypt, and sailed through the crystal-clear waters of the Maldives. Each destination brought new challenges and discoveries, but what Marcus cherished most was the bond he and Emily forged during their travels. Every shared sunrise, every moment of awe, reminded him of the fragility and beauty of their time together. One of their most profound journeys was to a small monastery in the Himalayas. They had heard about the monks who lived there, known for their wisdom and serenity, and felt drawn to the idea of learning from them. The journey was arduous, involving steep climbs and thin air, but when they finally arrived, they were greeted with warmth and hospitality. Over the course of several weeks, Marcus and Emily immersed themselves in the rhythms of monastic life. They meditated, helped with daily tasks, and engaged in deep conversations with the monks. One of the elders, a serene man named Tenzin, told Marcus something that stayed with him. The miracle you seek is not outside of you, it is the realization that you are already whole, already complete. These words resonated deeply, affirming what Marcus had begun to understand about his second chance. It wasn't just about survival, it was about self-discovery. Back home, Marcus became a mentor to others facing life's challenges. He spoke at schools, hospitals, and community centers, sharing his story and encouraging people to embrace the present moment. He found that his vulnerability, his willingness to share not just his triumphs but also his fears and mistakes, resonated deeply with audiences. People approached him after his talks, tears in their eyes, thanking him for giving them hope. It was humbling, and it reminded him of the interconnectedness of human experience. Despite his newfound purpose, Marcus wasn't immune to moments of doubt and fear. There were nights when he lay awake, haunted by the memory of those 24 hours when he believed his life was ending. He wondered why he had been spared when so many others weren't. What if the cancer came back? What if he was squandering his second chance? In those moments, he turned to Emily, who always seemed to have the right words to anchor him. "You don't have to be perfect," she would say, holding his hand. "You just have to be here." As years turned into decades, Marcus's story continued to evolve. He and Emily became grandparents, their home filled with the laughter and chaos of little feet running through the halls. Marcus's memoir was published to critical acclaim, touching the hearts of readers around the world. People wrote to him, sharing their own stories of loss, love, and resilience. Some said his book had inspired them to reconnect with estranged loved ones. Others said it had given them the courage to pursue their dreams. Marcus read every letter, marveling at the ripple effect of his journey. One day, while walking along the beach near their home, Marcus paused to watch the waves rolling in. The ocean was vast and eternal, a reminder of how small and fleeting human life was in the grand scheme of things. Yet, as he stood there, he felt no fear, no regret, only gratitude. He thought of the people he had met, the lives he had touched, and the love he had shared. He thought of the miracle that had saved him, not just from death, but from the half-lived life he had been leading before. When Marcus finally passed away many years later, it was not with sadness, but with peace. He had lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than he had found it. At his funeral, people gathered from far and wide to celebrate his life. They shared stories of his kindness, his humor, and his unwavering belief in the power of hope. Emily stood among them, her heart heavy with loss but also brimming with pride. She knew that Marcus's legacy wasn't just in the things he had accomplished. It was in the way he had made people feel, inspired, valued, and loved. After Marcus's funeral, a quiet descended upon Emily's life that was both comforting and unsettling. For decades, her days had been filled with his laughter, his quirks, and the shared rhythm of their adventures. Now there was an absence, a stillness that felt like a hollow echo of what had once been. Yet, as she sat in their sunlit living room surrounded by memories of Marcus, she realized that his presence was still very much alive in the life they had built together. One of Marcus's lasting legacies was his memoir, A Second Sunrise, which had resonated far beyond what anyone, including him, had anticipated. The book had sparked a movement among its readers, a surge of letters, conversations, and stories from people who had been inspired to seize the moment and make bold changes in their own lives. Emily began receiving these letters directly after Marcus's death, a deluge of gratitude and reflection that left her in awe. Among the letters was one from a woman named Aisha, a mother in her late 30s, who had read Marcus's book during a particularly dark chapter of her life. She described how, after years of enduring an emotionally abusive marriage, she had summoned the courage to leave her husband and start fresh, opening a small bakery in her hometown. Aisha wrote about how the book's message of finding joy in every moment had given her the strength to believe in herself. Emily was deeply moved by Aisha's letter, and it inspired her to take the first steps toward a new chapter of her own. For weeks, Emily pondered how to honor Marcus's legacy in a way that felt true to the life they had shared. She decided to establish a foundation called Second Chances, aimed at supporting individuals who, like Marcus, were facing life-altering moments. The foundation would provide grants and mentorship programs for people to pursue their dreams, heal from trauma, or reconnect with loved ones. Emily poured her energy into the project, drawing strength from the lessons she had learned during her years with Marcus. It became her mission, her way of keeping his spirit alive while making a tangible impact on the world. The foundation's launch was a humble affair, held in a local community center. Emily stood before a small crowd of supporters, her voice steady despite the weight of the occasion. She spoke about Marcus, about the miracle that had saved him, and about how that miracle had become a ripple that touched countless lives. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Donations poured in, and within months, the foundation was fully operational, helping people from all walks of life transform their challenges into opportunities. One of the foundation's early success stories was a young man named Javier, who had grown up in a rough neighborhood where opportunities were scarce. Despite his talent for painting, he had never imagined a future where art could be anything more than a hobby. Through the foundation, Javier received a grant to attend art school, where he thrived. Years later, his work was featured in a gallery exhibit that drew national attention, and he credited the foundation for giving him the chance to pursue his dreams. Emily found herself growing close to many of the individuals whose lives were changed by the foundation. One in particular stood out, a widower named Henry, who had lost his wife to cancer and had been struggling to find purpose in his own life. Emily and Henry met during a foundation event, where they bonded over their shared experiences of loss. Their conversations grew deeper over time, and eventually, a quiet companionship blossomed between them. Henry wasn't Marcus, he could never be, but he became a source of comfort and joy in Emily's life, a reminder that love could take many forms and flourish even in unexpected seasons. As the foundation grew, Emily decided to expand its reach internationally, a move that brought her to parts of the world she and Marcus had dreamed of visiting together. She traveled to rural villages in Africa to support clean water initiatives, collaborated with educators in Southeast Asia to fund schools, and worked alongside community leaders in South America to create sustainable farming programs. In every place she visited, she carried Marcus's memory with her, sharing his story and his philosophy of living fully in the present. One particularly poignant moment came during a trip to Nepal, where Emily was invited to speak at a conference on resilience and hope. As she stood on the stage, looking out at a sea of faces, she felt an overwhelming sense of connection. These people, like Marcus, had faced their own moments of despair, their own brushes with mortality, and yet they were still here, still striving for meaning and purpose. Emily spoke from the heart, weaving Marcus's journey into a larger narrative about the strength of the human spirit. The audience responded with thunderous applause, and afterward, people lined up to share their own stories with her. Emily's travels also gave her time to reflect on her own life and the legacy she was building. She began writing a memoir of her own, one that chronicled her journey with Marcus, and the way his miracle had transformed not just his life, but hers as well. The process was cathartic, allowing her to revisit the joy and pain of their shared years while finding clarity about her path forward. When the book, The Echo of a Miracle, was published, it became a companion piece to Marcus's work, and readers found solace and inspiration in its pages. As the years passed, Emily found herself increasingly drawn to nature, where she felt closest to Marcus. She bought a small cabin in the mountains, a place where she could retreat from the demands of her work and immerse herself in the tranquility of the wilderness. There, she spent hours hiking, meditating, and watching the changing seasons. She began to notice the intricate rhythms of the natural world, the way the forest seemed to breathe, the way the stars danced across the night sky. It reminded her of Marcus's belief in the interconnectedness of all things, and it brought her a profound sense of peace. One winter, while snowed in at the cabin, Emily stumbled upon a box of old letters and journals Marcus had kept during his final years. As she read through them, she discovered thoughts and reflections he had never shared with her. Moments of vulnerability, gratitude, and wonder that deepened her understanding of the man she had loved. In one entry, he wrote, "If I've learned anything from my second chance, it's this. Love is the only thing that lasts. It's the only thing that matters." The words brought tears to Emily's eyes, but they also filled her with a renewed sense of purpose. She decided to create a retreat program through the foundation, inviting people to the cabin for workshops on mindfulness, creativity, and self-discovery. The retreats quickly gained popularity, drawing participants from around the world who were seeking a space to heal, reflect, and reconnect with their own inner miracles. Emily loved hosting these retreats, finding joy in the sense of community and transformation that unfolded within the cabin's walls. By the time Emily reached her late 80s, the foundation had grown into a global network, touching countless lives. She spent her days surrounded by the fruits of her labor: letters from grateful recipients, photographs of smiling families, and the enduring impact of Marcus's story. Though her body had grown frail, her spirit remained strong, buoyed by the knowledge that she had lived a life of meaning and love. When Emily finally passed away, she was laid to rest beside Marcus, in a quiet cemetery overlooking the sea. At her funeral, people gathered once more to celebrate not just her life, but the extraordinary journey she and Marcus had shared. Together, they had turned a fleeting moment of despair into a lifetime of hope, proving that miracles aren't just moments of divine intervention. They're the choices we make to live with courage, compassion, and purpose. Years after Emily's passing, the Second Chances Foundation remained a flourishing testament to the lives Marcus and Emily had lived and the legacy they had built. While the foundation had initially been a local initiative, it now stretched across continents, creating hubs of opportunity in places where hope had once seemed scarce. In villages, towns, and cities worldwide, Marcus and Emily's names became synonymous with resilience, transformation, and the belief in miracles. The foundation was now managed by a team of dedicated individuals, many of whom had once been recipients of its support. Among them was Javier, the artist whose career had blossomed thanks to the foundation's initial grant. Now a successful painter with exhibitions across the globe, Javier had returned to Second Chances as its creative director. He spearheaded a program called Art for Renewal, which used artistic expression as a tool for emotional healing and self-discovery. Under his guidance, young artists who had endured hardship found their voices, painting murals, sculptures, and pieces that reflected their journeys from pain to empowerment. Another notable leader within the foundation was Aisha, the baker who had left an abusive marriage to build a new life. After thriving with her bakery and mentoring other women in similar situations, Aisha was now the head of Second Chances Women's Empowerment Initiative. Her programs provided counseling, vocational training, and financial literacy workshops to women seeking independence and stability. Under her leadership, thousands of women had regained their confidence and taken bold steps toward brighter futures. One of the foundation's most innovative projects came from a young man named Dev, an engineer whose life had been saved by the foundation years earlier. After being diagnosed with a life-threatening illness as a teenager, Dev had been given financial assistance for his treatments and later mentorship to help him pursue his education. Now a pioneer in renewable energy, Dev had developed a program that brought sustainable power solutions to underserved communities. Through Second Chances, villages in remote regions gained access to clean water and electricity for the first time, transforming daily life in immeasurable ways. Beyond its tangible successes, Second Chances had become a symbol of possibility. Every year it hosted an annual summit, where individuals who had been touched by the Foundation's work gathered to share their stories and celebrate the power of change. These summits were held in cities around the world, and each year brought fresh voices and perspectives. People came to tell tales of triumph over adversity, of reconnecting with loved ones, of pursuing dreams they had long abandoned. Each story reinforced the central message that Marcus and Emily had lived by, that it is never too late to change, to heal, or to find purpose. One particularly moving story emerged from the summit in Nairobi, where a young girl named Nia stood before an audience of hundreds to share her journey. Born in a slum on the outskirts of the city, Nia had grown up in extreme poverty, her family struggling just to survive. At the age of 9, she discovered her talent for music, using discarded pots and pans to create makeshift drums. When Second Chances launched a music education program in her neighborhood, Nia's talent was recognized, and she was provided with lessons, instruments, and mentorship. Now, at the age of 16, Nia was a rising star in the world of African music, her songs blending traditional rhythms with modern beats to tell stories of hope and resilience. As she stood on the summit stage, her voice steady and clear, she dedicated her success to Marcus and Emily's vision. "They believed in people like me when no one else would," she said, "and because of that belief, I can dream beyond what I once thought possible." The foundation's impact wasn't limited to individuals. Entire communities were being transformed. In a small coastal town in Indonesia, for example, a program initiated by Second Chances had revitalized the local fishing industry. For years, overfishing and environmental degradation had left the community struggling, but with guidance from the foundation, they implemented sustainable practices and diversified their economy. The once struggling town was now thriving, its people empowered to protect their environment while securing their livelihoods. As the foundation continued to evolve, it became a hub for innovation and collaboration. It launched an initiative called the Ripple Effect, encouraging people who had benefited from second chances to pay their success forward. This program led to countless new projects and partnerships, from literacy programs in South America to mental health initiatives in Europe. The impact of the foundation had grown so vast that it was nearly impossible to trace all the ways Marcus and Emily's story had touched lives. Amid the expansion, Marcus and Emily's granddaughter Lily emerged as a rising figure within the foundation. A passionate advocate for social justice, Lily had been deeply inspired by her grandparents' legacy and was determined to carry it forward. She joined the foundation straight out of university, quickly proving herself as a leader with vision and empathy. Under her direction, the foundation began exploring the intersection of technology and philanthropy, using digital tools to reach even more people in need. Lily spearheaded the development of a mobile app called Renew, which allowed users to connect with Second Chances resources from anywhere in the world. Whether someone needed counseling, financial advice, or mentorship, they could find support through the app. Renew also encouraged a sense of community, enabling users to share their stories, offer encouragement to one another, and celebrate their progress. The app became a lifeline for millions, breaking down barriers of distance and accessibility. In her speeches and writings, Lily often reflected on her grandparents' journey and the miracle that had set everything in motion. She spoke about how their story had taught her the importance of courage, gratitude, and the power of small, consistent acts of kindness. "My grandparents didn't just survive, they transformed," she said during a keynote address at the United Nations. And because of their transformation, countless others have been given the chance to do the same. Their legacy is proof that a single moment of grace can spark a lifetime of change. As the years rolled on, Marcus and Emily's story became the subject of books, documentaries, and even a feature film. The movie, titled A Second Sunrise, captured the essence of their lives, from Marcus's brush with death to the incredible ripple effect of their shared purpose. Audiences around the world were moved by the film's message, and it reignited interest in their memoirs, which became perennial bestsellers. The impact of their lives extended even further, reaching schools, universities, and organizations that used their story as a teaching tool. Professors taught about the psychology of resilience using Marcus's experience as a case study. Social workers drew inspiration from Emily's foundation model to create similar initiatives in their own communities. Their story became a living example of how one moment of clarity could reshape not just a life, but an entire world. In the twilight of her life, Lily often visited the cabin where her grandparents had spent so much time. She would sit on the porch, gazing out at the same mountains and forests that had brought Marcus and Emily so much peace. One day, while cleaning out a drawer in the cabin study, she discovered an envelope with her name on it. Inside was a letter from Emily, written shortly before her passing. The letter was simple but profound, filled with reflections on love, purpose, and the journey of life. Emily wrote, Lily, never forget that the greatest miracles are the ones we create through our actions, our love, and our belief in the goodness of others. Your grandfather and I lived our lives trying to honor the miracle we were given, but the real miracle is this: the way that love, once set in motion, never stops growing. It's in you now, and it will carry on long after we're gone. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on being given 24 hours to live? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.